Good morning, afternoon, evening, everyone. We live in a world that often confuses leadership with perfection, where strength is mistaken for having it all figured out. But what if I told you that real leadership isn't about pretending to be invincible? It's about the courage to say, I don't know, and still show up. Great leaders aren't the ones who stand above their people. They're the ones who stand with them. They earn trust not by showing how strong they are, but by showing how human they are. Today, I want to talk to you about a kind of power we often overlook, the power of vulnerability in leadership, and why, if we truly want to inspire, connect, and lead with purpose, vulnerability isn't a weakness. It's where real strength begins. Vulnerability builds trust and deepens connection. This idea might seem counterintuitive in a world that often tells us to never let them see you sweat. We are conditioned to believe that showing emotion, uncertainty, or fear is a sign of weakness, especially in leadership roles. Leaders are expected to be composed, confident, and decisive. But true connection, the kind that drives loyalty, fosters collaboration, and builds a resilient team, does not come from flawless performance. It comes from being real. It comes from being human. Imagine a leader who walks into a room and always appears perfect, never flustered, never uncertain, never open about their own challenges. At first, they might command respect. People may admire their strength or their confidence. But over time, something subtle happens. The team stops opening up. They start hiding their own struggles, too afraid to seem weak or incapable. Creativity slows down, risk-taking diminishes, and psychological safety, the feeling that it's okay to make mistakes or speak honestly, begins to vanish. This isn't just a theory. It's a reality in many workplaces where vulnerability is seen as a liability. Now contrast that with a leader who walks into the same room and says, "This project is important, and I'm excited. But I'll be honest, I'm feeling a little anxious about how we're going to meet this deadline. I know we've got a strong team, and I trust we'll figure it out together." What happens in that moment? Instead of pushing people away, vulnerability pulls them in. It invites others to say, "You know what? I've had the same thought," or "Here's an idea that might help." That leader just created a space where people feel seen, safe, and willing to contribute without fear of judgment. That's the kind of space where trust takes root. Trust isn't built through perfection. It's built through consistency, empathy, and openness. When a leader is willing to admit they don't have all the answers, it signals to their team that it's okay to be honest. It tells people, you don't have to wear a mask to belong here. This level of honesty creates emotional safety, and emotional safety is the foundation of every strong, high-performing team. There's a profound difference between authority and leadership. Authority may come with a title, but leadership is earned, and it's earned through relationships. Vulnerability is what makes those relationships authentic. When a leader shares their story, not just the highlight reel, but the failures, the doubts, the moments when they weren't sure how things would turn out, it creates a powerful sense of connection. People begin to see themselves in the leader. They think, if they can lead while being honest about their challenges, maybe I can too. That's how leaders inspire others to step into their own courage. We often think of vulnerability as an emotional risk, and it is, but it's also a strategic decision. Because trust is not just a nice to have, it's a performance driver. Teams that trust each other communicate better. They solve problems faster. They are more adaptable when things go wrong. And they are more likely to go above and beyond, not because they have to, but because they want to, for the team, for the mission, and for a leader who leads with heart. Vulnerability in leadership is not about oversharing or emotional dumping. It's about intention. It's about choosing to be open when it matters most. It's about saying, I don't know, when that's the truth. It's about asking for help instead of pretending to have it all together. And most importantly, it's about showing people that their value is not based on being perfect. It's based on being present, committed, and real. There's a quote that says, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Vulnerability is how we show that we care, not just about the outcome, but about the people involved in creating it. When leaders show up with humility, empathy, and openness, they model a culture of trust that filters down into every conversation, every collaboration, every decision. This kind of leadership doesn't just improve workplace culture, it transforms it. It turns teams into families, coworkers into collaborators, and projects into shared missions. It teaches people that it's okay to take risks, to speak up, and to be themselves. Admitting flaws creates space for growth and innovation. In leadership, there's often an unspoken expectation to maintain an image of competence at all times. Leaders are frequently placed on a pedestal, expected to have every answer, to make every decision with certainty, and to lead without hesitation. But when leaders refuse to acknowledge their imperfections, they unintentionally create a culture where failure is feared and mistakes are hidden. This fear stifles creativity, limits experimentation, and ultimately blocks the very growth organizations and individuals need to thrive. True innovation requires risk, and risk by its very nature carries the possibility of failure. When a leader pretends to be infallible, it sends a clear message. Failure is unacceptable. That message trickles down through the team, creating an environment where people avoid trying new things because they're afraid of getting it wrong. Over time, this results in stagnation. People stop challenging the status quo. They stick to what's safe. Ideas lose their edge. And growth, both personal and organizational, grinds to a halt. Now imagine a different kind of leader. One who says, "I've made mistakes, and here's what I've learned from them." Or, "I don't know the answer yet, but I'm open to exploring it together." This kind of leadership doesn't diminish respect. It deepens it. It demonstrates self-awareness, humility, and emotional intelligence. It tells the team that they don't have to be perfect to contribute. It gives them permission to explore, to experiment, and to grow. And when people feel safe to take risks, that's when real innovation begins. Growth thrives in an environment where people feel free to be honest. When leaders admit their flaws, they model the behavior they want to see in others. They show that learning is part of the process, that evolution is a strength, not a weakness. This mindset shift transforms how people approach their work. Instead of striving to avoid mistakes, they begin to see mistakes as stepping stones to progress. Instead of covering up their errors, they reflect on them, learn from them, and share those lessons with others. Some of the world's most innovative companies have built their cultures on this principle. They understand that failure is not the opposite of success. It's part of it. They encourage leaders to be transparent, to share the struggles behind the victories, to normalize the setbacks that come with trying something new. This kind of leadership culture doesn't just produce better results, it builds stronger teams. Teams that are resilient, adaptable, and willing to push boundaries because they know their worth isn't defined by how few mistakes they make, but by how well they grow from them. Admitting flaws also strengthens credibility. It's a paradox, but the more open a leader is about their limitations, the more people tend to trust them. Why? Because authenticity is magnetic. People can sense when someone is being real. They can also sense when someone is pretending. When a leader owns their shortcomings instead of hiding them, it signals integrity. It tells people, "You can believe me, because I'm not pretending to be something I'm not." That kind of honesty fosters a deep sense of psychological safety, where people feel encouraged to bring their full selves to work, including their uncertainties and doubts. There's also a powerful ripple effect that happens when leaders admit flaws. It changes the way feedback is given and received. In a culture of perfectionism, feedback often feels like criticism, something to be feared or avoided. But in a culture where imperfection is embraced, feedback becomes a tool for growth. It's seen as a gift, an opportunity to improve, rather than an indictment of failure. People become more receptive, more reflective, and more motivated to evolve, not because they're afraid of falling short, but because they're inspired to get better. The willingness to admit flaws also creates deeper collaboration. When leaders acknowledge their blind spots, they invite others to step in and contribute their strengths. It becomes less about hierarchy and more about partnership. Instead of one person carrying the burden of all the answers, the team works together to find solutions. This collective intelligence leads to richer ideas, better decisions, and more dynamic results. And it all starts with a simple, courageous choice. To say, "I'm not perfect, and that's okay." And that's okay. Leadership is not about knowing everything. It's about being open to learning anything. When a leader admits their flaws, they model a growth mindset that shifts the entire team's approach to challenges. They show that leadership isn't about having all the answers, but about creating an environment where answers can be discovered together. In doing so, they unlock the full potential of those around them and spark a culture of continuous improvement, creativity, and progress. Authentic leadership inspires loyalty and courage. In a world filled with polished personas, rehearsed responses, and carefully crafted corporate images, authenticity stands out like a beacon. People are not just looking for someone to lead them. They're looking for someone they can believe in. Authentic leaders are those who speak from the heart, act in alignment with their values, and lead with sincerity rather than strategy. They don't wear masks or play roles. They show up as themselves, and in doing so, they give others the courage to do the same. There is a unique power in seeing a leader who is unapologetically real. When someone leads without pretending, without hiding behind jargon or authority, it creates a profound sense of trust. It tells people, this is someone I can follow, not because they're perfect, but because they're honest. Authenticity resonates because it's relatable. People are naturally drawn to leaders who are willing to admit when they're struggling, to share their stories, and to express genuine emotion. It reminds everyone that leadership isn't about being above others. It's about walking alongside them. When a leader is authentic, they inspire not through command, but through connection. They don't need to raise their voice to get attention or assert their position to gain respect. Their influence comes from being grounded in truth. People feel that they can approach them, speak freely around them, and share concerns without fear. This sense of openness builds a foundation of psychological safety, which is essential for any team to thrive. People don't have to look over their shoulders or second-guess themselves when they're working with someone they trust. They are free to contribute fully, take initiative, and bring their whole selves to the table. Loyalty in its truest form isn't born out of obligation. It's born out of emotional connection. Employees don't commit to a leader because they were told to. They commit because they believe in the leader's integrity, purpose, and vision. Authentic leadership cultivates that belief. When a leader shares not just what they do, but why they do it, and when that why is rooted in values rather than image, people rally behind them. They don't just show up for the job, they show up for the mission. They're willing to go the extra mile, not for a paycheck, but for a cause they care about and a person they respect. Authenticity also emboldens others to lead in their own way. It gives people permission to let go of perfection and embrace presence. When a leader is vulnerable and true to themselves, it sets an unspoken example. That it's okay to be who you are, even in a professional setting. It's okay to have emotions, to ask questions, to share ideas that aren't fully formed yet. This kind of culture fosters courage, not the loud, dramatic kind, but the quiet, everyday bravery of speaking up, showing up, and trying again after failure. The most memorable leaders are not the ones who tried to be everything. They're the ones who are willing to be themselves. People remember how a leader made them feel. They remember the conversations where the leader listened with empathy, the moments when they admitted mistakes, and the times they stood firm in their values even when it wasn't easy. These are the moments that forge deep, lasting connections. These are the moments that build loyalty that no incentive or policy ever could. Authenticity is not about being raw and unfiltered at all times. It's about being real and consistent. It's about ensuring that who you are on the inside matches who you are on the outside. People notice the difference between a leader who says the right thing and a leader who lives it. The latter doesn't need to prove themselves constantly. They inspire through presence, not performance. And that kind of presence gives others the courage to lean into their own truth, even when it's uncomfortable. Leaders who embrace authenticity are often the ones who lead through influence rather than control. They recognize that people don't want to be managed. They want to be inspired.
Hello?
They want to feel seen, heard, and valued. And when they do, they are willing to take risks to innovate and to grow. They feel empowered not just to follow, but to lead in their own right. Authentic leadership is contagious. It spreads through an organization, creating ripples of honesty, courage, and integrity at every level. It's easy to underestimate how powerful it is to simply be genuine. But in leadership, it may be the most important trait of all. Because when people can see your heart, they're far more likely to follow it. And when they follow not just because they have to, but because they want to. Leading with vulnerability humanizes authority. In traditional views of leadership, authority often comes with distance, a separation between the one who leads and those who follow. Leaders are placed on pedestals, seen as figures of control, power, and certainty. But while authority can demand compliance, it rarely inspires commitment. True influence, the kind that moves people's hearts and minds, doesn't come from standing above others. It comes from standing among them. And that begins when a leader dares to lead with vulnerability. When leaders allow themselves to be seen, not just in their strength, but also in their uncertainty, they shift the dynamic from power over to connection with. They move from being unreachable to being relatable. They stop being a symbol and start being a human. That shift has the power to transform how people respond, how teams function, and how organizations grow. Because people don't connect with titles, they connect with humanity. They don't follow authority blindly, they follow those who lead with empathy and authenticity. There is something profoundly disarming about a leader who says, "You don't have all the answers," or "I made a mistake." It doesn't diminish their authority. It deepens their credibility. It shows they are aware of their limits and confident enough to admit them. This kind of vulnerability makes space for others to contribute, to share ideas, and to voice concerns. It dismantles the invisible walls that hierarchy can build and replaces them with bridges of trust. People are far more willing to speak up and offer their best when they feel like they're speaking to a person, not a position. When authority is paired with vulnerability, leadership becomes a shared journey rather than a solo performance. It invites collaboration. It encourages participation. It signals that everyone's voice matters, not just the one at the top. In doing so, it fosters a sense of ownership and empowerment among team members. They are no longer just following instructions. They are co-creating solutions, shaping outcomes, and growing alongside their leader. This sense of partnership builds engagement, loyalty, and mutual respect. There is also a psychological impact when leaders lead with vulnerability. It helps break down fear, which is often present in top-down environments. Fear of making mistakes, fear of not being enough, fear of speaking out. When a leader opens up, that fear begins to melt. People begin to feel safer, braver, and more open themselves. They realize they don't have to be perfect to belong or to succeed. This creates a culture where learning and innovation can flourish, because people aren't paralyzed by the need to appear flawless. Leaders who embrace vulnerability also model emotional intelligence. They demonstrate that strength doesn't mean being stoic or detached. It means being present, being aware, and being willing to feel. It means responding to people not just as workers, but as humans, with hopes, struggles, and dreams. This approach transforms interactions. Feedback becomes a dialogue rather than a monologue. Conflict becomes an opportunity for growth rather than a threat to power. Vulnerability doesn't weaken authority, it refines it, making it more compassionate, more effective, and more sustainable. In moments of crisis, this kind of leadership becomes even more powerful. When uncertainty is high and morale is low, people don't just want a leader who has a plan. They want a leader who understands. A leader who can say, "This is hard and I'm feeling it too," immediately builds connection. That shared humanity becomes a source of collective strength. It binds people together with a sense of we rather than I and them. And that unity can be the difference between surviving a challenge and growing through it. There's a misconception that vulnerability will cause people to lose respect for a leader. But in truth, the opposite is often true. People respect those who are willing to show their humanity. They admire those who are honest about their journey and who don't hide behind their title. Vulnerability signals courage, not weakness. It shows that the leader is secure enough in who they are to let others see them fully. And that security is deeply reassuring to those they lead. The most powerful leaders in history are often remembered not just for their decisions, but for their hearts. For the moments they showed fear and still moved forward. For the times they admitted doubt but continued to lead with hope. For the honesty that made them real and the humility that made them great. Authority alone can make people obey, but authority with vulnerability makes people believe. It makes them feel seen, heard, and valued. And when people feel that, they don't just comply, they commit. They don't just follow, they invest.